And welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast of Jackson and Kyle. I am joined here, as always, by the man who's a better boxer than Jake Paul. Kyle, how are you doing?
I am good. I guess I'm a pretty good boxer. I'm here with Jackson, who of course is now the most famous podcast for getting Justin Herbert wrong. How's it going?
Yes, that's right. I was going to start out with an intro. That was a fun little adventure that I went on. If you guys don't know, if you don't follow me on Twitter, first off, how dare you? But basically, my video about talking about how Justin Herbert, I'm an idiot for why idiots like me misevaluate Justin Herbert, ended up getting retweeted by the Chargers official account. So a lot of fun stuff here in the Twitter world.
Yeah, I do think it's an important conversation that, not everyone has to be Skip Bayless and die on the hill that LeBron is a choker, which he's had basically since 2011. And even though LeBron's disproved that many times, you can also change your opinion and have a different feeling on things after more data comes in. So credit to you, obviously.
Yeah, well, tell that to all the Sam Darnold stands out there. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to become stands of very new players, and we will die on the hill of several of these guys for years to come, probably. We are going to do, it should be fun. So I'm going to do a top 10 of two different positions and top 5 of one position. So if this is your first podcast, hello, thank you for watching or listening. What we're going to do is we're going to do top 10 defensive backs, then top 5 linebackers, and this is excluding edge rushers, only inside linebackers or outside linebackers in a 4-3, but mostly inside linebackers. And then we will be doing top 10 defensive linemen. So that's interior linemen or edge rushers. Got it, Kyle?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Okay, yes. Just kicking it to you if you had anything else to say. Guess not. We'll just get into it. All right. So we're going to start with defensive backs. And let's start things off with a guy who is probably most famous for throwing his shoe. I have Marco Wilson here at number 10. I think that there's some intrigue here. He ran a 4.35, and you're going to hear me talk a lot about the 40-yard dash when it comes to defensive backs, and we can talk more about that, why that's the case in a second. And he's not great at the line, although I would say that he is a pretty good tackler despite not being the biggest. He has good hips, not the best ball skills, and he's not explosive despite kind of a fast 40-yard dash. So while I do like his footwork and I do like how he can play man, I wanted to put him on my list because I think there is some intrigue here. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up being a starting defensive back, but there are still 9 guys I have ahead of him.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think the first thing if you're building a defensive back, I think one of the 3 things you want for is speed, length, or ball skills, especially in this day and age with the way passing offenses work. Speed, length, and ball skills, I think, go a long way. If you have a guy who has all 3 of those things, that's, your top end, that's your Jalen Ramsey type of defensive back who should be going in the top 5. I think Wilson at least has one of those things. Like you said, he has some speed, which I think is important. He's going to be able to cover some downhill receivers. And as you've seen now in the league, the NFL and the offenses are getting faster and faster, and guys like Wilson are going to have to keep up. I think he's going to find a way to fit in this league because of that. So I'm with you on this one.
Yeah. Does the shoe throwing concern you at all?
No, I think it was. If we're gonna, I hate a lot. Unless it's like a major character concern that we talk about. I just think like it's a college kid. I mean, heaven forbid, right?
Right. And a defensive back, I really want some guys who aren't going to go over the line as a corner.
Yeah, exactly.
The position most notorious for that. Yeah, so I like him. Again, well, we won't spend too long on, I think, a couple of these higher guys. We'll go on to number 9 now. I have Greg Newsome. I like Greg Newsome. I think he's interesting. I guess my concern about him is I feel like a lot of what I like about him is, he moves in very quickly. And I think he could be a really good zone corner. He runs a 4.38. So again, when I say he runs, that's what they got at the pro day. So you can kind of say 4.38. That's probably 4.48, which isn't the fastest, but it's good enough to be a successful corner. And I would say he doesn't overly commit, but he could make some decisions quicker, which is part of the issue. And he definitely commits too many penalties I've seen as well. But there is some intrigue here as well. And especially like if it's a zone team, I think that there could be some real value here with Greg Newsome.
Yeah. I mean, I really like Newsome. I would actually probably have him a little bit higher on my list. I like the ball skills. It just seems like he, he's one of these guys that I talk about all the time. It just seems like he knows how to play football, and I just want a guy like that on my team. He has kind of the ability because I think he's so good against, he's actually really good against the deep ball too. I think that's something that's really important. He just, even though he doesn't have the top end speed, like you said, it just seems like he kind of knows where to be at all times and just understands the angles to make plays on the football no matter what. But he's a guy that I think can move around the field. He can play on the outside. I think he could even operate as a third safety because of his ball playmaking ability. So I think he's a guy I just really like who's going to go on and, I just think he's just going to make plays for whatever teams he's on.
Yeah, that's no good stuff. I think for one thing, you're going to see when we talk more in corners, and I should mention I have 3 safeties ahead of Newsome. So 3 safeties are in my top 8, which is part of why he's fallen a little bit. But speed is a very real thing, and I'm going to make a video on this. I've recorded it actually. I just need to post it. But what's interesting about speed is, I uploaded a video today that was kind of like we actually evaluate corners pretty well. But then I went back and I looked at 40-yard dash, and there's no better predictor in any position of who's going to be successful than a 40-yard dash with a corner. No other predictor in any other position, including when you were drafted. It's the best predictor. And so, again, a 4.48, that's out of the danger zone. The danger zone is above 4.5. You don't want to be above there. And I'm saying 4.48. My mindset is I just add, 0.1 to every 40-yard dash. So it's 44.38. 40, which was what, it's hard to do this because, again, we only have pro days. But, there's a lot to like about him. You're absolutely right. And I think what you said about him potentially being like maybe even a nickel corner, I could see that working out well. So I draft him. I just think I draft him in the 2nd round.
That's fair. Yeah, and I think based on, just his ability to make plays, I think he kind of stands out on the field and he's going to, probably get taken in the 1st round because of that. Whether it's right or wrong, we'll see. One other thing I do like, especially with this Northwestern team this last year, big games, this guy played well. He played really well against Justin Fields. I mean, Ohio State still got the win in that one, but I thought he and that entire secondary did a very good job against Justin Fields, who's going to be a top 15 pick, Chris Olave, who's probably going to be a 1st or 2nd round pick next year. I think that, he played very well in a game against real NFL talent in that Ohio State game.
Yeah. I'll admit this right off the jump. If I'm wrong about someone, I think that Greg Newsome's probably the one. I think if someone came from the future and said you were wrong about one player in this defensive back class, I'd say, was it Greg Newsome? He'd be my first guess because I think I could easily see him being better. But that's where I have him now. And let's move on to number 8. We have a safety. I have Andre Cisco here from Syracuse. He's a fun player, very fun player to watch. He's physical. Think of him as a Jonathan Abram, Jabril Julius Peppers. Not Julius Peppers. The Giants guy. Jabril Peppers. I just said it. But he's just that kind of style where he's just a hard-hitting safety who's going to run in, he's going to make a tackle. Some of that kind of concerns me a little bit because you're going to probably hurt your teammates. You're going to hurt yourself playing that style. But at the same time, there is clear value there. He isn't incredible in coverage, but I think that he makes up for it for sort of being that tackler. He plays that role. I'm not saying he'll be as good as, some of the guys I mentioned, but he can play well. So I would feel good about getting him. He's another guy I have a 2nd round grade on, but we're getting kind of into the higher 2nd round grades.
Yeah, I think he's got incredible speed. I think he's got incredible instincts on the field. He takes some risks, and it's something I don't always love in safeties, but you see guys like Troy Polamalu was always my perfect example of this. It's like you're okay with that guy taking risks because sometimes he takes risks and it's huge plays for your team. He kind of has a little bit of that in him. I'm not going to say he's going to be Troy Polamalu. So
right.
That's too much to ask of him, obviously, but he kind of has some of those things to him in his game too, where he's just kind of like, all right, I'm just going to go and see if I can make this play. I'm going in head first. I'm going through kind of that run through the brick wall mentality. And he's either going to make a big play or he's going to give up a 30-yard play because of it. I mean, I love the boomer bust behind him, but I think he's going to be an interesting player. And I think the right defense can tone him down a little bit, and he's going to be able to make some plays for you.
Yeah, and I just checked on I did a prospect list too of just 1 through 30. It was like 1 through 45 that I'm going to make a whole video on in the future as well. I've also recorded that one already. He was 33 on my list. So I have him as my highest graded player who has a 2nd round grade.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that sounds about right. So I think I think he'll probably go in the second round, and I think he can. He's the kind of guy who I think can make a pretty early impact too.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll stick with safeties here. I have another safety. I'm going to go Elijah Molden here. Now, I'm calling him a safety. He did play corner last year, but it kind of was like that. Hey, we just need corners. You're going to play corner. I think that he could be a very good slot corner as well. What concerns me about he's not an outside cornerback. He runs a 4.51. And that's the pro day time. He's not an outside corner. But one of the things I really like about him is how well he breaks in. And again, his lack of explosiveness could be a big issue. I could see that happening, but I like how he seems like a smart guy. He can, and again, it's that breaking in thing that where either he'll be a good cover 3 zone corner, or preferably I like him as a safety or a nickel.
Yeah, I like a lot of Molden's game. Like you were saying, I think he can do a lot of things. He's versatile. I think the one thing, and you kind of hit it on the head with this one, it's like he's not, otherworldly fast, and he's kind of small for me.
Yeah,
So how's
only
he going to be able?
5'10".
Yeah, exactly. So if he's going to be small and not like insanely quick, is he going to be able to make it up on the NFL field? Is my biggest question. But I think he's got great instincts on the field, and like you said, he can play at the back. He can move to the slot. I think he can move around the football field and do some things.
Yeah, and I could see him. You were big on Antoine Winfield last year. That was one of your better takes last year. And I could see. I'm not. There's a little bit of that there with Molden of just get a good football player. Don't necessarily worry about some of the. Don't worry about him not necessarily being 6 feet.
Yeah, I got a couple Antoine Winfield specials for you here, so don't worry.
Okay, good. I'd say let's just move on now because I have a hot take at 6. Are you ready for a hot take?
Oh boy.
Ready for this?
Let's see it.
I have Patrick Surtain here, number 6 on my list. And again, you hear me talk about speed. The 4.46, that's just concerning. 4.46 as a pro day time. He runs probably sub 4.5. And like I said, let me just try to explain how big 40-yard dash is. I went back and I looked at the first all corners selected in the first 2 rounds. In the past, I think I did like past 9 or 10 drafts. And out of the guys who run a sub 4.4, what I did was I graded each corner 1 through 3, 3 being best, 1 being worst. So 3 is a perfect score. There was like 8 of them. And out of the total, it was 24 total points that they could have gotten. They got 23 out of the sub 4.4. So sorry, that was long-winded, I know. But basically my point is that if you run sub 4.4, you're almost always good. You run over 4.5, you're almost always not good. Maybe he'll be the exception. There are a couple of exceptions. Marcus Peters, Trey White. There's a couple, but it's very rare. And that would concern me, despite the fact that, listen, he's physical. Nobody throws his way. It seems like he has great ball skills, good fundamentals. He's a smart player, but the speed worries me too much to draft him too high in the first round, unless it's unless it's just a perfect situation.
Yeah, he's my number 3 corner, honestly. The speed thing kills me because it's just like, I think there's going to be a lot of teams that he's not going to be able to be on the field against. Like, yeah. How's he going to play against Kansas City? How's he going to be on the field against the Kansas City Chiefs? How's he going to be on the field against some of these other Buffalo, too's in the same boat? How's he going to be on the field against a team like Buffalo Bills? I just think things like that are going to be a problem. And I don't know. I think, watching him last year, outside of Sean Wade for Ohio State, who probably had the biggest drop from the beginning of last season to this season as far as draft stock, who, he might not even get drafted this year because of it, basically. I don't know. I just kind of, when I watched him, it's like, I get it because, like you said, there's not a ton of guys throwing his way, but I just didn't love it when they were throwing his way. I feel like he has a tendency to commit a lot of penalties. I feel like he's going to be susceptible to that, playing that physical brand. And I just feel like with how much speed is being put into these offenses now, there's going to be a lot of teams that they just can't put him on the field against as a number 1 corner.
Yeah. And again, the reason why I still have him this high, because now I almost feel like I have to justify having him as my number 5 corner. But I actually at one point had him as number 8 on this list, which was behind Molden and Cisco. I decided to put him a little bit ahead. And the reason why was because you put him in the right defense where maybe it's a cover 3 zone where he doesn't have to worry about getting beat deep because he can play 7 yards off every play, or you put him on, as a nickel. I think he could really thrive in that role. So I think there is maybe some talent here. I just don't know if it's true number 1 corner. In fact, I would be shocked if it is. It would be the exception, not the rule, for him to play incredibly well as with the speed that he has.
Yeah, no, I agree. It'll be interesting because the thing is I don't feel like this is an awesome cornerback draft, even though people are hyping up these three guys. I really liked, Okuda didn't really work out, but I liked him and CJ Henderson a lot more. But there's one guy I really love in this draft, and then I don't know. I do feel like Surtain falls a little flat for me if he's your number one corner you're drafting.
Yeah, well, I have two corners that maybe you could keep your eye out for, but we'll get into that in a second. Let's talk about another hyped up guy, Jaycee Horn. I have him at 5. A lot of it's the same thing. Now, again, he ran a 4.37 40, but that's a pro day 40. And like I say, you add a tenth of a second to it. It's 4.47. That's what it is. And honestly, that might be a little bit generous with some of these pro day times. So we just don't know. And if you're running 4.4 between 4.5, the chances are you're gonna, that's not in the danger zone, like I said. So I'm not as worried as I am about Surtain, but it's not exactly like you're gonna win with explosiveness. And the flip side is, again, he has great feet, and I do think he makes really good decisions. Although I think he makes quick decisions. I think he doesn't always make the right ones, but that can kind of be coached. And honestly, about his physicality, which keeps getting talked about, I think it's a bit overrated. I think Surtain is better physically, and I think that he gets a little bit handsy. He's going to get more penalties in the NFL than he does, and I just don't know how he makes up for that. So again, right situation, put him in the cover 3 zone defense. I love it. I've heard some guys who I respect are saying he's not a first-round talent. I disagree. I think he is, but I think he's back half of the first round.
This is my number one corner, honestly.
Okay,
I think he's got great instincts on the field. I think he's got great technique, and he's not as physical as Surtain, but I think he's physical, and he also has better speed than Surtain. It's not, like you said, it's not top end speed, but I think it's good enough speed to go with that physicality. I think he's going to be a shutdown guy in the NFL. I'm not going to say like he's a lock or anything like that, but I just feel supremely confident that he's going to find a way to be really good in this league. Just based on that length, like I said, and based on the ability that, I don't think he's necessarily really bad at any one thing, in my opinion. I just think he's good at a lot of things, great at a few things, and I don't think he has a lot of holes in his game right now. I think he's going to be pretty good at the next level.
Yes, well, the chat has blown up. After Surtain, I was saying, hey, chat's on my side. They're agreeing with my hot takes. Now we get the 5. Now everyone's blown up. So maybe not so much. I see some people saying, like, technique beats speed every day. Well, it doesn't. Statistically, it doesn't. And again, Dank Burrito, which again, incredible name. I respect your opinion just on the name alone, but you can be successful not running great in a straight line at a workout. Sure, that's true. But that's the exception, not the rule. I keep saying, again, I'm going to make a whole video on this. The reality is, if you just looked at guys who were going to go in the first 2 rounds and said, it just looked at the 40 times, you'd have a better chance evaluating them than looking at when they were selected. That's the best predictor. And that's a bit of a concern. On top of this, again, I do think the penalties are a real thing. And I think there's a difference between being a great college corner and being a great NFL corner. And again, I still think there's value here. I just think that I have 3 corners and a safety who I like better.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of these guys at the top, you can kind of have different spots on them. I just see a lot of instincts in his game. He's the son of a former NFL player, son of a former NFL star, which I really like. I always like sons of former NFL guys. And look, I just think that he makes plays, and I think that he's going to be really good at the next level. Like I said, the flags are a concern, and the same thing I said with Surtain, so I got to keep it consistent. I do think the flags are a concern, but I think that's something that a lot of rookie corners struggle with. They struggle with trying to be physical, but not overly physical at the next level. I think it's going to be an adjustment for him, but I just see this guy as a guy who can go into any man defense and be pretty good right away, and then potentially be very good down the road.
Yeah, so I have him, I believe it says I have about 30 of my total prospect rankings. Well, I guess here's my concern. And again, I don't hate him. I wouldn't have put him in the top 5 if I thought he was going to be a bust. But if his hands get him in trouble sometimes with the penalties, and he doesn't have explosive speed, so that way he kind of has to use his hands. What does he do? How does he win at the line if he doesn't have great speed and he can't use the physicality because he's going to get called in the NFL? What's the solution there?
Well, he's going to have to learn how to use his hands without committing penalties. I mean, that's going to be the thing at the end of the day. If we've seen some corners not be able to adjust to that, and they get flags thrown on them all the time. And then we've seen guys like, I'm trying to think of the example off the top of my head. Wasn't it Brandon Browner basically who, He still committed he still committed plenty of penalties, but he found a way to be successful in the league while also using his physicality to his advantage.
But in specific systems, he was successful.
Yes.
Would he have been successful if you put him on an island and say, hey, go cover this guy?
Probably not. And I don't, I think
that's why he's 5. I agree with you, everything you said, but that's why I have him at 5.
Yeah, that's fair. So who else you got? I want to see the rest of your list now.
Okay, yes. Number 4, this is my number 1 safety. I have Jamar Johnson here from Indiana. He is someone who, if you say, hey, Jackson, one of your defensive backs was a bust that you thought was going to be good, it's probably him because he runs a 4.60, which is not great, especially given that's a pro day time. But it doesn't matter as much for safeties as it does for corner. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to make it such a big deal of safeties. It doesn't have the same impact as it does for a corner. And he's a smart player who hits hard. He has great ball skills. He's, solid size, 6'1", 196. The only issue I have with him is speed. So there's a lot to like here. I think he's a starter. I got to be honest, I don't love a lot of the safeties here, but I think that he'll be a starting safety. There's a lot to like about Jamar Johnson.
Yeah, this is one of my Antoine Winfield guys. I just think that he has the instincts. Like I said, I'm big on instincts in terms of secondary guys. If you know how to just read plays and get to the ball, I think that's just a big deal to me because you have to make plays, as much as, I think speed is important. Like you said, I think length is important, but at the same time, speed and length is not important if you can't get to the ball and can't read a play. So I think that's just really important, and especially at the safety position when you're asked to stand at the back and read the defense and read the offense, basically. And this is a guy who can do that. He can move around. He kind of has a little bit, of that Antoine Winfield, Tyrann Mathieu to him, where he can play that nickel corner. He can play that deep safety. He can move all around the field and just jump out and make plays. I'm a big fan of a lot of that. Like you said, the speed's concerning, but I think he has a lot of the capabilities of just making plays around, just making all sorts of different plays to be able to, make up for it.
Yes, I like this comment of, do you make this list to go against all consensus on purpose? I think that most people make their list to go towards consensus on purpose. That's what I think, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, there's no exact science to drafting. Otherwise, we'd have perfect draft record. Mitchell Trubisky wouldn't go number 2 overall if we all knew what we were doing. So, heaven forbid someone goes against the grain because of it. Jeff Okudah wouldn't have went number 4 if we all knew what we were doing.
Yeah, he didn't go number 4. He went number 3.
Well, that too,
Yeah, but back to Jamar Johnson. Exactly. Like I said, and one of the things that I think is true is, yes, he's not the fastest, but with a safety, if you can put yourself in the right position and read the play, well, great. Now he only has to run 10 yards, whereas another guy would have had to run 15. So he can still get there quicker than a dumb fast guy. So that's why football IQ is probably the number 1 attribute in a safety, as long as you have just good enough physical attributes. And I think he does to play at the next level.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think he has a lot of that capability. So you said this was your number 1 safety, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I had Johnson as my number 2 safety, and that's because there is one guy that I had above who was my another Antoine Winfield guy for me. So I want to hear your take on this. Or should we wait till the honorable mentions? What do you want to do?
Let's give it a second. Then let's get to the honorable mentions, and then we'll come back.
Okay, go ahead to number 3 then. Let's see your top 3 corners.
Okay, I have Eric Stokes here as my number 3 corner. Again, talking about valuing speed, I really struggled back and forth between him being 3 or 2 because again, I love that he ran a 2.45 40. There's a video out. It might have been a little bit sped up to make it look a little better, but still, it's 4.3 speed if it's not 4.2 speed. He has incredible awareness. There were so many plays watching him where the ball just got tipped up and he just happened to spot it right away. He gets the interception. Some people I saw were saying that as a negative, like all his interceptions were kind of lucky, but I don't think it's lucky. I think he's just aware and knows what's going on. He's admittedly horrible at run defense. His frame is not great. At 6'1", the height is good. The 185, not so much. He's thin. He's skinny. He's thin. He's not going to be able to get around much blockers, to be honest. And doesn't have the best ball skills, and he can't get beat with footwork. But the awareness and the speed, it's so good for me that I have to put him here at top 3.
Yeah, I hadn't done much NFL draft watching on him, honestly, but I do remember watching him play at Georgia. And like you said, I think the speed and ball skills, like you said, are there. I do think watching him at Georgia, from what I can remember, I do think he's a guy who's probably going to have to be like whoever drafts him really has to pay attention to scheme and how he's going to fit in it. I don't think he's the type of corner who I think can play in any defense. I think he has to kind of be adopted to the right defense, if that makes sense to you. I just think that because of his size and frame, I think he needs to be in the perfect situation. But, I think he's a guy who could be a very good corner at the next level still because, like you said, speed kills that defense.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I guess kind of the flip side could be he maybe wouldn't play so well on that Seattle cover 3, but at the same time, there's like 3 teams that run that. So there it is fair, but I feel like I'd rather the guy who can fit in 90% of scheme. And again, he's someone who I could also see just not working out because of the not great hips. He doesn't. He can get beat with footwork, but I just think that this again 4-2 with great awareness. That's going to put you high on my board.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. It'll be interesting to see him at the next level, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes, honestly, because I know you don't pay attention to a lot of the list. I don't think he's going to have I'm not sure he has a lot of first-round grades, so it'll be interesting to see where he ends up.
Yeah, I think I would definitely draft him in the first round. Where did I have? I think I had him. I had 17. That was my prospect ranking. So just barely not in the first half. At number 16 on my total prospect rankings, I'm going with his teammate, Tyson Campbell here. Again, he runs a 4.34, probably closer to a 4.44, but his explosiveness is incredible. And he's someone who I wouldn't be shocked if he runs, his field time is faster than his 40 time because his explosiveness at the line is just fantastic. He makes good reads as well, and he has really good ball skills, unlike Stokes, which is kind of what put him over the edge, especially with his physicality. He's 6'2", and just the same weight listed at 185, but he looks way bigger. He plays way bigger. He can blitz. He can blitz well. And while he can get beat with footwork as well as Stokes, so I can't put him at number 1, he's another guy who I can see him, put him on the outside. He can play, and he doesn't have the black hole in the run game that Stokes does.
Yeah, he's not necessarily a black hole in the run game like Stokes is, but I wouldn't call him a plus in the run game either. But the thing is like at the end of the day, I don't think he needs to be great in the run game because, he is going to be an outside cornerback at the end of the day. So that's something he can work with. I really like him too. I think he's actually pretty underrated among the cornerback rankings because like you said, speed, instincts, ball skills, that's everything I want. If he was just a little bit longer, he'd probably be, a top 20 pick amongst, consensus mock drafts. So I think he's got a lot to his game to like. I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah. I agree. I'm a little bit surprised. I thought he played pretty well against the run. Maybe that's just, maybe I need to rewatch that, but it didn't look like a problem to me.
I think he's good enough, but I don't think he's anything like, he's not. I don't think he's elite prospect rankings in that kind of regard.
Gotcha.
I think he's just
him for his run defense.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing. You can get away with it because he's the outside corner. You don't have to necessarily worry about that. He's just got to work on containment. I think that's going to be the big thing.
Yeah, and in comparison to Stokes, who I think that you would legitimately like run plays to try and get him to have to get into the play because he wouldn't be able to. Campbell, you wouldn't necessarily do that. So that's why I have him at 2.
That's fair. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, interesting pick with the Georgia guys. But yeah, I mean, I understand the skill set. They have a lot of capabilities, I think, too. So,
yeah. All right. Number 1, who do you think I got?
Okay. So you have I'm guessing it's either Caleb Farley or maybe you're going to Asante Samuel Jr.
I am not going to Asante Samuel Jr. It is Caleb Farley. Not getting too hot takey here at number 1. Caleb Farley. I mean, again, the 4.28 40, so sub 4.4 speed probably. And this is all the tape we're looking at. He didn't play his last year. He sat out with COVID, but he's 6'2". I would say that he doesn't necessarily always play like he's 6'2", and there are some real issues I have with him, such as he can get beat on double moves. I think that he makes his decisions way quicker than he has to, given his speed. He is constantly getting turned around, and I do think he is very raw, but the speed and the way that he cuts when he does get it right and when he's cutting perfectly, it's a thing of beauty. And I could easily see him being like a number 1 shutdown corner. The only thing is he needs a little bit better coaching. But as long as he doesn't get stuck with like an awful team, which it looks like, I think from what I understand, a lot of people have him going in the back half of the first round, which could be a great thing for him. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see this. He has all pro potential, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think he does. The one thing that jumped out to me that's concerning, you kind of hit it there too, is the downfield coverage concerns me sometimes. Like you said, he gets turned around trying to find the ball, I think, and sometimes just doesn't turn around at all, honestly.
Right.
So I think that's something that's a concern with him, because how many offenses run a lot of vertical passing game? There's quite a lot of them now in the NFL. So that's something he's going to have to learn pretty quickly. But as far as, like I said, there's three things you look for in a defensive back. You look for speed, you look for length, you look for ball skills. He has all three of those things, and that's obviously why he's, the elite prospect everybody's talking about, even though he's not as refined as the guys like Horn and Surtain, who are talked about as, two of the other top three guys. But he just has all the capabilities where, like we talked about Horn and Surtain missing a little bit of that speed that he has, but maybe making up for it with some of their physicality. But he's just as physical, and he has great sides with that speed.
Exactly. And the reality is, it's a lot easier to teach someone, hey, be a little more patient on that double move than it is to teach someone to run a 4-2 instead of a 4-5.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the only thing. So I had him at number 2 just because I was concerned about some of those vertical passing routes with him, and especially going into the NFL nowadays. But I do think, it's another guy where it's like, if he gets put in the right defense with the right coaching, I think he's going to be fine. It just kind of depends on where he goes, because I wouldn't love him on a couple teams that are picking early in the first round, but a couple of those mid-first round teams with some pretty good defensive coaches, I'd really like him there. So,
yeah. New Master 69 says, isn't his injury history concerning or something? And it is. He has some injury history, and that is a concern. That's my biggest concern about him, quite frankly, even more so than the mental mistakes he'll make. But I think that the reality is the history of the NFL shows if there's a guy who has some injury concerns but is a talented player, drafting him is almost always the smart decision.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple other guys with injury history too that are a concern. You look at a guy like Greg Newsome, also has some injury concerns, so it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I do think he'll be fine. It'll be interesting. I'm just interested to see where he goes, because I do think he's going to need. Like I said, the reason why I had Horn over him, it's because I feel like Horn could go into. I feel like he's going to be able to step in right away and kind of know his role and know what he needs to do, and also know what he needs to improve on. I feel like he's going to have to go to his team with the right coach in place to kind of show him the way more so than Horn is. That was the only reason I had him number 2 behind him. But a team like, if he ends up with like Robert Saleh on the Jets with that Jets second pick, I feel like that's a great situation for him.
There's an interesting interview with Caleb Farley and it's Chris Sims. And immediately Chris Sims says, there's this one thing I didn't like. And Farley goes, the Miami game. And then he just explains the play immediately without even having to. And his recall, he's another guy who I think that he wants to be great. That's just the vibe I get from him. Whatever that means, I don't know how much stock you take into that. But if you are someone who takes into that stuff, that's another quality attribute to him.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see all these cornerbacks, and all these cornerbacks are interesting. It'll be interesting to see how they all end up and where they're going in the NFL.
Yes. All right. Let's get to some honorable mentions. We're spending a long time on this, which is good. I think that this is it's good that we flesh this stuff out because I think it's very interesting. So who is your safety that you think I should have put in my top 10?
All right. This is a little biased for me, but I still love the guy, and he's so good at a lot of different things. Richie Campbell's the most polished NFL or college safety right now. He's going to be able to step in right now. I don't know if his ceiling's as high as a guy potentially of Cisco if he figures some things out, because I really do like Cisco and Jamar Johnson. But I think right now Richie Grant could step in and win an NFL Rookie of the Year. I think he's that polished as a safety. We saw him in 2018 as a deep safety. He's now played kind of a hybrid role where he's playing some deep, he's playing forward some. I think Richie Grant's going to be an absolute stud in the league, at least in year 1. And I think he's definitely got the highest floor in my mind. I don't know how high his ceiling's going to be, but he's just such a polished player back there.
Well, Richie Grant's interesting. There's a lot I like about him. He takes good angles. I think he has good footwork. I think that I like that he can play man, and he is a good tackler. He is someone who, a bit undersized, that 6 feet tall, but only 172 pounds. And the 4.72 40-yard dash worries me. If it worries me about Johnson at the 4.6, this is over a tenth of a second worse. So that is concerning. But I did have him on my honorable mentions list. I think there is some some value here, but I don't know. I'm not sure if there's enough. You're right about maybe I could see him being a starter. I wouldn't be shocked at all. But I tend to think, I think if I have a second round grade on him, so I'm not completely down on him, but I just don't know if I'm as high potentially on him.
Yeah, and I think he is going to go in the second round. That kind of seems like the consensus. And like I said, I just think he gets football. He gets on the field, and no matter what role you want to put him in at safety, he understands where he needs to be and how to do it. And yeah, he's not the fastest guy in the world, but I think his ability to make perfect angles on plays and just read the game so well make up for it. So I'm really high on Richie Grant as a second round pick.
Yeah, interesting. So I'll keep that in mind. So maybe next year when he wins, gets one vote for offensive rookie of the year, but should have won it, or defensive rookie of the year, but should have won it. Then we'll go back and say, hey, you nailed it.
Yep. So who else was on your honorable mentions list?
So I have a Fedi Melanfanawu. I'm not sure exactly how the name goes. Wild name, but he's a solid player. But I just feel like there's a lack of explosiveness. Although I do like his feet and hips. Like I said, I don't love the safety class. We should also talk about Trayvon Moorhig. I'm gonna make a whole video about it. Do you get him? I don't get him. I don't get why he's the guy who's getting mocked in the first round. He does run a 4.5 for safety, which is good. He has a good quick burst, but he misses so many tackles, and he's not good in man coverage, not really good in zone coverage, or just a traditional safety coverage. I think he's mostly a strong safety who can stop the run, which there's some value there, but there's not a first round pick value there.
Yeah, he's big. I think that's what people look at, honestly, is that he's big, so that kind of works. So yeah, I'm not entirely high on him. Like I said, he's not one of my top safeties. I like Johnson and Grant, and I just like guys who are more polished more than projects, honestly. And I feel like guys like Grant, Johnson, and who was the other guy too? There was somebody else. Cisco too. Although Cisco's kind of a project, but those other two guys I think are a little more refined and going to step in right away. One other safety I had was Tyree Gillespie at Missouri. He's this tiny little guy on the field, but he hits so hard. It's just so fun to watch him on the field. I think he's a really fun prospect. He's like a deep safety who can, play the run defense really well, which is not something you really want to see. But I'm a fan of his game. I'm interested to see how he ends up. He's just fun to watch on the football field.
Yeah, and my other guys for corners, again, real quick, because we spent a while on this now. Aaron Robinson out of UCF. Who I like, he has interesting, kind of weird technique, but I would say he plays better outside, despite the fact that he mostly played in the slot. So he's a big wild card for me. I do worry he'll get beat with some footwork, despite the fact that he is pretty physical. Also, he's listed on Google as like 6'4". So when I first saw him, oh, this could be interesting. And then I'm like, he's not 6. He's 5'11". I don't know why he's listed as 6'4", but the 4.38 is kind of in that middling. It could be okay. We'll see. And then there's also Paulson Adebo and Asante Samuel Jr. What worries me away from both of those guys, though, is they both run 4.4 pluses, which, given the pro days, probably 4.5 pluses, which it's too concerning for me. Even though, Adebo, I like his ball skills, good vision, but he gets beat by double moves as well. He's not incredibly with his hips, so that concerns me. And Samuel I have as strong despite his not great size, but he makes too many mistakes in zone. And while he does have good footwork, if you're making mistakes and you don't have the speed to make up for it, that's an issue for me.
Yeah. It's interesting to see Asante Samuel's kid not great in zone, though. That's the funny thing. But, I think he'll figure it out in the league. But, yeah, I kind of with you. I think he has some flaws, so.
Yeah. I saw how funny would it be if he ends up getting – this is something I saw the other day. How funny would it be if he got selected by the Eagles in, the second round? What storyline?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Or the Patriots, honestly. Just put him on one of those teams.
Yeah, it's like the bring back the dream team.
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah.
Asante Samuel, that's a tough wound. So we can move on.
Oh, right. I forgot about. Yeah, that's right. I completely whiffed. That joke went right over my head. Didn't even think about. Yeah. All right. Let's. I was like, yeah, I guess we could do that, Kyle. Whatever you're saying. There we go. Yeah. Let's go to linebackers. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do linebackers. I'm ready for it.
Spent a good 40 minutes on that one, so we're looking for a 2-hour show here, which should be fun. Linebackers, number 5, Jamon Davis. He's an interesting player. He's someone who I would consider taking a second round flyer on. I do find him very interesting. He plays coverage well, although he's not the best tackler and he can get blocked. To me, he's kind of this high ceiling but low floor kind of guy at 6'3", 206 pounds, runs a 4.47. There's intrigue here, although to me, I do feel like there's 4 linebackers, and then there's who would you take a flyer on, and for me, he's that 5th guy.
That's fair. I kind of feel like that he's a guy who didn't have a lot of college production, and I know it's a lot about tape, but we've also seen some guys with the lack of production then struggle at the next level. It's a big jump. So that'll be interesting to see. Yeah, I think that's the thing is that I think he's a good coverage linebacker, but I don't think he's very good against the runner in the middle. I think if you put him in the wrong role and not have him in a lot of coverage situations, I think he's going to get beat up by a lot of offensive linemen in the NFL is my only issue.
Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. He's definitely someone who I think he's unique. He can make the occasional splash play, so I don't think we need to spend forever on him. But he is my. I already said top 5, so I have to give a 5th. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Like I said, I think he's gonna find a role in the NFL, and I think it is going to be kind of that third down linebacker in coverage, or first or second down passing situations. But I just think unless he figures out how to shed some blockers a lot better, I think NFL linemen and tight ends are just going to be really tough for him to get off of him. Be significant contributor to the run game.
Yeah. All right. Number 4, Zaven Collins out of Tulsa. He's someone who's fun. 6'4", 260 pounds. He can blitz well. He makes the splash plays. He's a smart player. That's probably my favorite thing about him. And he's a really good run stopper. So, again, for linebackers, typically you want a big guy or a small guy. You don't want a medium-sized linebacker, which that's kind of interesting. And so getting a big guy who can stop the run, there's absolutely a role for him in the NFL. And he's someone who I think that a lot of teams, I think that he's I believe I have him as a 1st round grade.
Yeah, he's actually my number 2 linebacker. Okay. And I just feel like this is a middle linebacker who's going to be in the league for 12 years, honestly. I don't know if he'll hit all pro level, but I think he's going to hit a pretty darn high level if it's not all pro. He is great against the run. He seems really good in coverage too. He's got great size. He's got great speed. It seems like he's got really good instincts on the field too. And he, really brought a whole nother level to this Tulsa team this past season. I'm a big fan of watching him play. I just think he's great around the ball. He's great at making instincts. And like I said, he does everything you want in a linebacker position, especially there in the middle. I'm a big fan of his game overall.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that, again, it's just he's someone you can find in a football field. So let's move on to number 3 now. We'll make some ground here with the linebackers. I'm not trying to go quickly, just kind of the way it's working. Jabril Cox. I like Jabril Cox a lot. I think that he's a really good coverage linebacker, which doesn't always translate to the NFL, but it actually translates to the NFL better than stopping the run does, which is a bit surprising. And while he didn't run the 40-yard dash, he said his goal was to run under 4.5, which speed does translate in the NFL with linebackers. That is something I look towards. It's not everything, but it is something. He's a good tackler, but the issue is he can get blocked, which is kind of something that I'm a bit concerned about. He's 6'4", 231. He reminds me of maybe a Zach Cunningham type. To me, he's a day 1 starter, and I think that he'll probably be a 10-year starter. He might not have that superstar potential that the top 2 guys have, in my opinion, but he is someone that I find very fascinating.
Yeah, I think he has some of the same concerns for me that Jamin Davis does, whereas I think a lot of run situations he can get beat up a little bit in there. But I also think he's better than Jamin Davis. I have less concern about it for him than I have for Davis. I think he's just a little more polished on that end. I think he's a little better against the run. And I also think he's great in coverage, kind of like Davis too. So that's why he's ahead for me. I had him at number 4 as well. I think he's a really polished linebacker and is going to be able to find a role in the league right away.
Okay, yeah. See, I have him. I think he's much better in coverage than Davis is, and I think that the height does help him, especially with this. If you're going to play a zone coverage team, like if I'm a cover 3 zone team or just a team that likes to play zone in general, he's someone I want on my team because those long arms make it difficult. It clogs up those lanes, and so that's what I like about him.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. I mean, when I say I like him a little more, I do think he's a better coverage linebacker. So I do think he is going to fit that role a little bit better. I just think it's a similar player, but I just think he's a lot more polished and a lot better at things than Davis is. And I think if you compare the two, that's why he's higher, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Number 2, no hot take. Got Jock here. Number 2. Some people have him at 1, so there is some argument. Although I think, to me, this feels like the right move. There is some concerns I have about him with his, he plays well in man coverage, but they would legitimately have him just like play man against wide receivers, which I've never seen a linebacker do before. It won't work in the NFL. And some of his moves, to be honest, won't work in the NFL. So I think he will be kind of up for a bit of it'll be a bit of a learning curve. He's kind of an Isaiah Simmons type, which is maybe a bit concerning because you look at how Isaiah Simmons started last year, although he improved a lot. So I think that it's a little bit concerning, but it's not too concerning. And also we can't completely say, well, it didn't work then, so it won't work now. Plus, he's 6'1", 216. So the way he's in that, he's small enough that he can move around. He can play well in coverage, really good coverage guy, and he's a good blitzer as well. So yeah, I think that he'll probably I think he's a bit of a project. I wouldn't draft him if I'm trying to be competitive this next year necessarily, potentially, but I do think that he's going to, in like 5 years, I can easily see him being a Pro Bowl guy.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's he's really fun to watch. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
Like if you look at, honestly, if you look at just tapes of guys and highlights, he's going to be your number 1 guy on a lot of board if you watch his highlights, because he's got the best highlights, I think, of everybody, just because he's really fun to watch. He's really exciting. Like you said, his moves sometimes that he put out there were insane. He's a little undersized for me. That's probably why I have him at 3. I have him below. I like Collins a lot. And honestly, like when I had the top 2 guys, I had probably like his top 10 players. I probably have him just outside the top 10 because he's a little undersized. And I just like Collins so much, like I said. But I think he's going to be really fun and really exciting to watch on the field. And it'll be interesting to see how his game translates, because I think he's a really versatile and kind of interesting player that has like some Isaiah Simmons vibes, but he's kind of more of I'm just going to do this. And, he can take out like 5 bodies at once just by ripping through all of them and showing off his speed.
Yeah, I think the size is probably a fair concern a little bit, especially because some of it, he will be violent at times, and that just won't work in the NFL. But also, what I like more about him is his coverage and his splash plays. And splash plays are something I really look for in a linebacker. I want a guy who's going to get turnovers, right?
Yeah.
Your secondary is supposed to make the quarterback have to get to a second read. Your defensive line is supposed to make your quarterback have to make decisions quickly. Your linebackers, I want them to make splash plays. I want them to come in and get a sack, get a fumble, get an interception, and he can do that.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. I think that he will be able to do that too. It's going to be interesting to see, like I said, is the size going to be able to hold up? Because one of the guys on here said in the chat too, is he going to have to move to safety, or could he move to safety? It could turn into a situation where he does have to move the safety because he's not able to adjust his game to the NFL with that size. I think he's going to be fine in the long run. But like you said, I think he is going to take a little bit of time. And I think people are going to, look to him to have like 5 sacks and, a few forced fumbles in year 1, because that's what he showed at Notre Dame. And I think it's going to take a little longer for him to do that.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely, to me, when you talk about ceiling, to me, he clearly has the second highest ceiling in this draft. Do you agree?
I think so. Even as much as I like Collins, I think that he has a lot of things that he does a lot of things that Collins can't do. That much is very obvious. So I do think he has the second highest ceiling. I think he has a much lower floor than Collins, though.
Yeah, seems like I'm a bit higher on him than you, but we both like the prospect. So we'll move on to number 1. Is this your number 1 guy as well, Micah Parsons? I think he's everyone's number 1 guy, or at least close to it.
This is an easy pick, honestly.
Mm-hmm. To me, I mean, he reminds me of it's a very Devin White-esque player where he, for one thing, the sub 4.4 40-yard dash for a linebacker. I know it'll end up being, a little bit higher pro day. I try to qualify all those, but still 6'3", 245 pounds, and still runs like he plays like one of those, he's a quick linebacker who has the size of a big linebacker. He is a great run stopper. He can blitz. His blitzing is fantastic. So again, talking about those splash plays, he makes a ton of splash plays. And some people are saying like he's trash in coverage. I think he's fine in coverage. He's a rookie. He's going to be a rookie linebacker, so he's going to have his issues. but like he doesn't. I don't see anything that makes me say like, oh, he's much worse than some of these other guys. So and what he can do in the running game and in the blitzing game, he's to me an easy pick, and I think he's a top 10 pick easily.
Yep, I think so. Last week on the offensive prospects list, I said I had two guys who I feel like are locks that I was willing to go on the limb and say are locks. I said Kyle Pitts and Penn in this draft. I almost had him at third as the third guy that I was like, this guy's going to be a lock in the NFL and be a stud. Mm-hmm. But I think he's awesome, and I obviously have him at number one. The only reason I don't have him as a lock is, like you said, I think he needs to clean some things up, especially in coverage to get better. I think, one of the things we talked about Devin White last year is that he's insanely athletic, but he's sometimes sloppy in coverage, trying to make up for it with athleticism. And I see a lot of that in him too, in his college tape too. I think he has insane athleticism to go with his size, and is sometimes a little sloppy because of it. If he's able to clean that up, and it's the same thing kind of like Devin White needs, I think he's going to be an awesome linebacker in the NFL. But at the very least, he's going to be awesome against the run because he can move north-south and sideline to sideline. I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought of too is like, name me the linebacker who is in their 5th year and is still getting confused at which guy they're supposed to cover. Not sucks at coverage, but it just hasn't figured that stuff out. Like, it doesn't happen too often. Usually at that point, you figure it out. So at a certain point, even if that is a concern, it's a lot easier to fix that than it is to run faster, to stop the run better, to blitz better. The things that he does well, doesn't come around too often.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's going to be interesting to see overall, but yeah, I think he has a lot of things you're looking for, and I think he's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, and so I have him as my number 3 overall prospect. That's not a quarterback, so I'm with you there. He's number 3. Now we'll get to some honorable mentions. I have Cameron McGrone, who, I don't know what his 40 time is, but he's fast. He does shoot through gaps really well. And he does make highlight real level plays, but I'm not sure about his coverage, which is kind of the issue. You also have Chad Stewart, who's an interesting guy. He's 6'3", 230, but he looks way smaller. And that has to be some sort of fake thing. He's violent and a good tackle. And he's one of those guys who's just seemingly all around the ball, which I find interesting. Do you want to talk about those or talk about any other honorable mentions?
The only guy I really had, and I only put him as an honorable mention because he's probably not going to go in the first or second round because of his size, but he's such an interesting player to me, and I always enjoyed watching him in college. That's Chaz Surratt at North Carolina.
Just talked about him.
Oh, I thought you said Stewart. I was like, who are you talking about?
I think I might have just, I don't know their name. I'm not good with names.
No, you're fine. Chaz Surratt at North Carolina. So we're both on the same guy. Like you said, he has an excellent nose to the ball. He is a former quarterback at North Carolina. They converted to linebacker because he was getting benched. Yeah. So he's really interesting to watch just because, like you said, nose for the ball. He's really undersized, but he just makes plays. And then there's another guy. You're talking about speed. Monty Rice, he's mentioned here in the chat too, out of Georgia. The guy just flies around. The guy is electric in the speed department. He's a fun linebacker out of Georgia too that I keep an eye on.
Yeah, I also like Nick Bolton. To me, he's that high floor, low ceiling kind of guy. I think he's someone who's going to come in and he's going to have some value. I just don't know how much value that is. And I also have Baron Browning and Dylan Moses are also players. Moses has the injury history, and to me, he doesn't take the best angles, which is a bit concerning. And also Browning, who's a really good run stopper, just doesn't do well in coverage, which there's a lot of those guys. You can kind of get a dime a dozen, a good run stopper who doesn't do well in coverage, it seems.
Yeah, it's a tough market to fill, honestly, because there are, like you said, there are so many guys. We'll see on Moses. I wasn't really, hot on him when he was, talked about as potentially the number 1 linebacker before all of his injuries and all that, but we'll see. I think he's going to find some things that he does really well, and he's an Alabama guy, so he's probably going to be pretty well polished in the league. Like you said, there's some concerns. He's a little slow to me. He's a little rough, as you said, on some angles. It'll be interesting to see how he does at the next level.
Yeah. So I have one more thing. The show might go long. Is that all right? Are you good?
Yeah, we're fine. Keep it going.
Okay. Yeah. So one more thing I wanted to bring up. Micah Parsons. If you're the Miami Dolphins, could there be some? We talk a lot about don't draft a wide receiver at 6. If Sewell and Pitts are off the board, Parsons is on the board, and you have an opportunity to get someone who fits that defense just beautifully. I mean, that's exactly the kind of defense you'd want to see him in. Could there be some logic there?
Yeah. I mean, I think there is logic there. So if you were Miami and you could get, because they have like 5-18 and then they have like 34, right, from Houston?
Yep.
So is
35, I think.
Yeah. If under this scenario, Pitts is taking 4 and then Sewell's taking 5, isn't best case scenario to kind of have something like Parsons at 5, offensive lineman at 18, whether it's one of those, a Rashawn Slater or another lineman at 18, and then get like a Terrence Marshall Jr. at 34? Like, that's best case scenario, right? Because I think that's realistic.
Yeah, I think so. Or, I would say Kadarius Toney at 18, then an offensive lineman at 35. But yeah, something like that would absolutely be good. I think that, and again, the linebacking core for Miami isn't like abysmal. It's fine. I would say it's kind of a little bit above replacement level, to be honest. But I think that you get Parsons there. I think he could turn that defense significantly better, and he could be a cornerstone of that defense for the next decade. So yeah, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah. And the thing is I look at the Dolphins and what they have at the end of the day and their needs. This draft is just loaded with offensive tackles and wide receivers.
Exactly.
And this could be a chance to get a generationally talented defender. Potentially. There's no guarantees in the NFL draft, but this is a chance to get a generationally talented defender. We saw how that flipped Tampa Bay's fortunes, along with getting Tom Brady, obviously. But with how many tackles and wide receivers there are in this draft, I think there's an opportunity there to, just say, let's get best player available in Parsons. Then we're getting guys like, there could be plenty of guys at tackle at 18, and there's plenty of guys at wide receiver at 34, or vice versa, that we can really capitalize this team.
Exactly, and that's sort of my point, is that it's not necessarily Parsons versus Chase. It's also you factor in the value difference that you can get with a different player. But yeah, all right, just an interesting thing I want to talk about. Let's get into the edge rushers. What do you say?
Edge rushers, let's do it.
Or excuse me, edge rushers or defensive linemen.
Yes, this will be fun because I feel like the edge rushing position right now has the most variance of any draft position in the league right now as far as big boards. So I'm curious to see what you have here. So let's get into offensive linemen.
Yes, all right. Number 10, I have Deo Undegabo, potentially close to something like that. I think that's about right.
That's a pretty good effort.
Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna give it a shot. Whether I know it or not. He's just this huge guy he has position versatility. I would put him as an edge rusher, but I'm not entirely sure that's where he'd end up playing because he's 6'5", 276. But he played a lot of edge in Vanderbilt. He has good feet despite his edge, but he definitely is slow, and I just don't see that many moves that would actually work in the NFL. So that's why I have him here at 10. He's interesting, but I can't really justify more than a day 2 pick.
Yeah, I think he's a great flyer, and he's going to be a guy who I don't actually think he's going to end up as a pure edge rusher in the NFL. I could see him as like kind of that 3-4 defensive end who's just going to, swallow up some defensive linemen for your outside edge rushers to take. Because I just think that, the size is going to limit him too much to fill that role. But I think he's a guy who's going to be interesting to, feel some versatility and potentially, mess around with and move across defenses to see what you can get out of him.
Yeah, I've heard some people saying Tampa Bay should go with a defensive edge guy sort of as a backup. To me, he feels like a great second round Tampa Bay guy. Of just you draft him and basically if someone gets hurt, he can just fill in there wherever you need him to fill in. He can do that probably.
Yeah, I mean, he's almost got, nose tackle size, honestly. If you put on 15 pounds, he could step in and fill that role. So it's an impressive skill set. So, I think he's got a little more polishment to his game than he needs, but I think he has a lot that he can contribute. And as soon as he finds a role in the league, I think he's going to be able to be pretty good. Yeah,
he's probably one of those guys I wouldn't draft, but I'd keep an eye out for.
Yeah. No, I think that's completely fair.
All right, so we got a few edge rushers that kind of feel pretty similar about all these guys, so we don't spend forever on them. First thing of Joseph Ossai, and basically kind of what you're going to see with the next 3 is that these are 3 speed rush guys. And if you look at a lot of the busts that have happened in the first 2 years, they tend to be guys who are mostly just speed rush. And that is the situation with Ossai. And while he is good at it, it just doesn't often translate to the NFL the same way it does in college because you're playing with tackles with bigger arms, and that's just a much more bigger issue.
Yeah, and that's the issue I have with him. He's a little undersized for me, and I think that's going to be tough for him to hit at the next level with that. I think he's 250 maybe on a good day. I don't know what they measured him as. So I think
his measurements aren't bad. His measurements are 6'4", 254. But I don't know if that's true or not.
Okay. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see because he looks small. I don't know if he just played smaller to me. I don't know. But it'll be interesting to see how he can do. But yeah, like you said, I think speed guys are kind of a gamble of what's going to work and what isn't. So it'll be interesting to see how he can adjust his game, or, he's got to be able to. I think a lot of these guys that you mentioned are going to just find a way to add a second move, and who's going to be able to do it.
Exactly, and that's kind of it's just there's a difference between a good college player and a good NFL player, and it really shines with defensive players, I think. And next is Aziz Ojulari, who I think is kind of the same thing. I think he's a little bit more explosive, but it's very similar to Ossai.
Yeah, so this is the guy who is a little more highly rated, but I feel kind of the same thing. And that's the big thing is everyone says he's undersized and needs to expand his pass moves. Well, they say that about a lot of guys who don't end up working out. Like you said, Chason was a guy also out of Jacksonville who kind of had the same issues. And I think he's going to be able to have the same issues, I believe, too. So it'll be interesting to see. I think that Ojulari, I think he's another guy who I think would be an interesting Tampa guy, is like that backup edge rusher people were talking about, because I think, in certain roles, I think he'll be able to step in and just, get after the passer, especially when they have so many good defensive linemen across their defense. But I don't think he's going to be able to go to a team like I'm trying to think of who has a bad defensive line off the top of my head. I don't think he's going to be able to. Yeah, he's not going to be able to go to Houston and just fix their pass rushing woes.
Yeah, luckily, I don't think Houston will have that issue, given that they don't have a first or second round pick. So they're probably okay.
Or the Patriots, he's not going to be able to go to the Patriots and fix a lot of their pass rushing issues.
Well, shots fired at the Patriots.
I mean, it's okay. The Red Sox are back, so I feel good.
That's right. And the Yankees are not back, so feel even better. Number 7, I have Jason Away, who is he's another guy who I feel like he is a little bit more complete than the other two guys I just mentioned. Well, he is still someone who I would say his primary move is a speed rush, which does concern me. I think that, he's a little bit stronger than the other two guys, and he's a better tackler than the other two guys. He's 6'5", 252. And I look at his 3-cone drill, it's 684, which actually the 3-cone drill is interesting because, I talked about 40-yard dash with wide receivers and how it does matter, but up until a certain point, once you run too fast, then people start drafting you because of how fast you run, and it becomes a mistake. So it's the same thing with 3-cone drill. And if you run a sub-7 3-cone drill, that's when people start drafting you because of the 3-cone drill. And he runs a 6.84. So there is maybe some concern that he's going to get overdrafted because of that. But again, there's stuff to like here. His tape is good. It's just when you rely on a speed rush, it's going to give me a little bit of pause.
He's interesting to me. I had him at number 5. I just think that he's going to be able to do some things on the field. I think that we continue to say this. I don't know why we have to keep saying this. The no sack thing in college football, I think, is overrated. He had no sacks last year, and everyone freaked out. I think he's going to be fine. It's a different situation, especially, this was a team that just lost Parsons for the year because he opted out, and, a lot of the defense changed for him. I think the defense is going to be fine. I think his skill set, I think he has you said a little bit better. I think he has a much better skill set than those past two guys. I think he has a lot more versatility. I think he has a lot more power than he probably shows on his tape too. I think he's going to be an interesting guy to take. I would take him in the first round.
Yeah, yes, I wouldn't hate. Let me check and see, where did I put him in my. I wouldn't hate that as a first round prospect. I'm trying to see I had him a little bit lower. I think I had him at 43 for my overall prospect grade. So I have him as a high second rounder.
Yeah, well, so the other thing too is that I don't think there's any necessarily elite edge guy in this draft, which makes it kind of interesting in that where are these guys going to kind of end up? I think there's a lot of really good edge guys, but I don't see any elite prospects at that position.
Interesting. I have an elite guy, so we'll get to that in a second. I think there is an elite guy. But for now, we'll talk about someone who's not elite, but I like the tools. Joe Tyron. He's kind of I thought the same quality as kind of some of the other guys, but just in the way that tends to translate to the NFL better than the other guys, where he has several pass rush moves that can work. I would like to see him be a little bit more physical, but he's a big guy, 6'5", 262, so he just has that size. His technique is an issue, but you get him the right coaching because he has good footwork, he has good size, solid 3-cone drill, 7-18, which is kind of right in that perfect zone. He's someone who I think that I would look out for, and if I can get him in the second round, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, he's not even my favorite defensive lineman from Washington, but I do think he's interesting,
Okay.
and I think he has some versatility to this game, like you said. I think he's going to be a fun player to watch going forward. I think he's a nice flyer for, like you said, the second or third round.
Yeah, exactly. And I still have a second. I literally have him one spot ahead of Away in my overall prospect grade. So that's kind of how I feel about them. It's just that his stuff tends to translate more. That's what I like about him.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. He's going to be interesting to watch at the next level.
Yeah. All right. I guess this is a kind of a hot take at 5. Not a scorcher, but I'm going to go Christian Barmore here. A lot of people have him as the number 1 defensive tackle. I do not, just for the record. But, there's a lot to like about him. He's the Alabama guy who's, 6'5", 311 pounds. He moves well for his size. He is definitely the kind of guy where what he does just isn't going to show up on the box score, but just a strong defensive tackle. Not a ton else to say about him, to be honest, but that's just kind of how I think there's some real talent here. He's a starter for me, for sure.
Yeah, I think he is too. I think the one thing, as I noticed, I think he is going to be a very good pass rushing interior defensive lineman. I think the one thing I don't like about him is he kind of went absent in some games. And it's not entirely his fault because there are so many playmakers on that team. But I just felt like there were some games where he kind of disappeared. And I don't necessarily love that in my defensive players. But I think he is a pretty steadying presence in the middle. And I think he's very good as a pass rusher from that interior slot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially someone who can, sort of a big body guy who can just sort of clog stuff up. And to me, he's my candidate for everyone writes him off as a bust after 1 year, but then has that sophomore step up that defensive tackles tend to have.
Yeah, that's the thing is defensive tackles in year 1 are really tough to grade. I think he is going to be fine in the league. It's just going to be how long does it get there?
Yeah. All right. Another guy who I think could be a candidate for that. How about Tyler Shelvin out of LSU? Now, there's some character concerns of him, apparently. He was disciplined by his team. He was also apparently up to 375 at one point. So if you're into that kind of stuff, it's a bit concerning. But the 375 doesn't sound as crazy when you realize he usually plays at, he's listed at 346. So he's a 350-pound guy usually. He's 6'3". And again, he's not one of those guys who's just fat. Like you can tell, that's his body doesn't look bad at that weight. And his first step is incredible. He's always the first guy off the line. It almost reminds me a bit of a Gerald McCoy. He's a lot bigger than McCoy, probably not as good as Gerald McCoy, but he's just the kind of guy where you line him up against a nose tackle. Now you have to pull your guard over to block him. You can't just have you line him up against the center, as a nose tackle. You now can't just have your center block him one-on-one. He is the definition of a nose tackle and that kind of only, but you know what? There's real value there. And I think that if you're a team that likes to play a 3-4, get Tyler Shelvin.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely with you. I love watching his game. He kind of has a little bit of that Vince Wilfork to him where it just seems like he's going to be able to swallow up 2 or 3 guys at a time. And if you have some good linebackers behind him too, it's just going to be a great run defense immediately. He's the kind of player who could flip a run defense almost on his own just because of what he can do in the middle of the field. I'm a huge fan of that. I think he's a bully down there. And, the character concerns, if it's off the field, you have a little bit of a concern, but I'm okay with my interior defensive lineman being a little bit of an asshole on the field. Yeah, honestly. As long as he can keep it just on the field, but as long as he's mean on there, I'm perfectly okay with it because he has to be a bully in the middle of that.
Yeah, and he can be. There's a lot to like about him. And again, one of the issues is just the scheme fit, but I think that if that's the scheme you run, he's the guy you want.
Yeah, and I think there's still plenty of teams that run the 3-4 that are going to want to take him.
I agree. Number 3 here, I am going to go Kwity Paye. I like Kwity Paye. I think there's a lot to like about Kwity Paye. He allegedly ran like a 6'3" cone drill, which I just don't really believe. There was a video out, but again, It's a video that wasn't even at the pro day that's out about it. So I don't know. The video looked good, but again, for all we know, it's doctored video, and it wasn't at the pro day. So I don't know what to make of that. But he's 6'4", 271. So he has size. He has good hands, good speed, good feet, good technique. And I would say good, but not great strength. That's kind of the one thing that I'd say, that even despite his size, it's not like you're not blown away by his strength necessarily, but it's still really good. And he does everything else so well. He kind of reminds me a bit of a Shaq Barrett sometimes, of just, he has like every play in the playbook he can do, which is just, it just makes it really hard to stop. So I could easily see him. To me, he feels like a 10 sack guy. And I'm pretty high on Kwity Paye.
Yeah, he's number 2 on my list. I think he has a huge skill set. He is, he's insane. He's insane to watch on the field. His sack numbers aren't great, but once again, I don't care. He just does so much on the field that is important. He can eat up blockers. He can get past blockers. He can go through them. He has I think he needs to add a little more to his, or refine a little bit of his moves, but I still think that the skill set and the potential is there, that this guy's going to be a edge rusher with 1,000 different moves at that spot, and is going to be able to get by you in a variety of different ways. Because like you said, the speed to go along with that size, I think, is going to be impressive. So I'm interested to see him at the next level. I think he needs to refine, like I said, a couple of his moves a little bit, but I think he's going to be a guy who has a lot of potential at the next level as this diverse pass rusher.
Yeah, and he's also a guy, we talk about scheme. I think he fits either scheme. I think you want to put him in a 3-4, he'll be fine. I think you want to put him in a 4-3, I think he'll be fine. I think he can come off the edge in either way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think he's, like I said, I think he's one of the most versatile edge rushers in this draft. And I'm going to be interested to see where he goes, because I think it's going to be interesting. If he's going to get the little bit of time to refine his game a little bit, I think he can be special.
Yes. A lot of people have him at 2. I had him at 3 in terms of linemen, because I have a defensive tackle ahead of him. You said that you're a Washington guy you liked better, as myself as well. Levi Onwuzurike. I did not believe it when I saw that he's listed at 293. He plays like he's 320 at least. His strength is unbelievable. His footwork. He reminds me. He almost has a little bit of an Aaron Donald-esque feel to him. Obviously, he's not going to be Aaron Donald, because no one is. But just the footwork, the size, despite being sort of compact, there's a ton to like about Onwuzurike.
Yeah, he is just so explosive on that offensive line. He does so much well. I'm a huge fan of his game and just how he can move on the interior defensive line. He has to get a little better with his hands. That's the one thing that I have heard and have kind of noticed, is that, if he's not the first off the ball, he kind of gets beat. But I think that the upside of this guy is insane. I'm a huge fan of his overall and what he can do on the football field. And I think he's going to be a really talented 4-3 interior defensive lineman. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think he's someone who can rush the passer from the inside, which is something that I do think that having an edge rusher is more important than that. So some people could argue Kwity Paye, but I just think that he's just better. I think that he's, to me, maybe this is hyping up too much. I think he could be a 10 sack guy, despite being a defensive tackle. I think he's that quality of player. Yeah,
I mean, I think he's legit. I'm a huge fan. Like I said, I think he's got. You just don't see that kind of explosiveness in the interior defensive line. It's very rare, and that's why when you say something like Donald, it's not crazy. Now, we're not saying he's going to be Aaron Donald, because, like you said, that's impossible, because there's only one of those guys. Mm-hmm. But when you see that kind of explosiveness, it jumps off at a guy like Donald in that skill set, where there's just not many guys who can do stuff like that. There's not many guys who can jump off the ball and blow past you like that in the interior defensive line.
Yeah, and again, one thing that tends to really translate well to the NFL is strength. To me, he's the strongest. Maybe not the strongest defensive lineman, but he's definitely the strongest. I'll say it. He's the strongest defensive lineman in this draft, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly comes off that way on some of the tape. It's impressive. Yeah, I can't say enough about this guy. He was number 3 on my list. I told you I was a huge fan. I'm interested to see him at the next level.
Yeah. All right. So, and just to show how high I am on him, my top 5 non-quarterbacks, it's Sewell 1, Pitts 2, Parsons 3. I have the next guy I'm about to select at 4, and Levi is 5. So he's my 5th best non-quarterback in this draft.
Wow. Okay. That's a little bit higher than me, but yeah, I mean, he's an impressive football player. I think he's going to be interesting to see at the next level.
Yeah, no, I'm very high on him. I'm also very high on this guy. So my number 4 overall prospect that's not a quarterback. Number 1, he's my number 2 defensive prospect overall, but number 1 defensive lineman, Jalen Phillips.
Yes.
Is there any criticism about Phillips that isn't about the injury history, about the concussions? Because I can't think of a single one other than the injury history.
That's basically it. I mean, this kid
Uh-huh.
was so background on him. I don't know how much you deep dived into him. He was this insane prospect at a high school. Everyone was like, "This guy's a lock." He was almost Clowney level high with prospect. Didn't pan out at UCLA with some injuries. Transferred over to Miami and had an insane season this past year. And I think the one thing is that I think the two things is, like you said, injury history, and then the second thing is going to be, as I said earlier, with one of the prospects, 1 year of insane production is going to be tough. If you're looking at just that, it's a smaller sample size, so there is some leeway there. But I just think he's going to be insane. He has everything you want for an edge rusher. Now, I said there's no elite edge rusher in my book. He's about as close as I get to without saying an elite guy. I think he's going to be a really highly rated guy. I think he has a wide variety of moves. He's got speed. He's got power. He's everything you want in a defensive end. Basically what we've looked at since high school.
Yeah, and again, he's my 4th highest graded player that's not a quarterback. So that shows how high I am. He's big, he's strong, he's physical. He's 6'5", 266, and the 3-cone drill is a 701, which is, again, perfect. It's not quite in the zone where he's going to get drafted because of it, but it's as close as you can get to it, basically. His technique is flawless. I mean, it's just a thing of beauty, and he just feels like he's the kind of guy where if there's someone who's going to win a defensive Player of the Year award, I would probably bet it on Phillips or maybe on Zerike, but it's hard to do it as a defensive tackle. So probably I wouldn't be shocked at all to see Phillips win a Defensive Player of the Year someday. And now that I say that, he'll probably end up being a bust.
Yeah, It could have. I mean, the thing is, it's going to be interesting is I feel like defensive linemen are kind of getting overlooked in this draft. So I think he also has a chance to go to a pretty good team, and if he ends up on a pretty good team along with, his skill set, I think he's going to be a really fun player to watch next year, that he could be on potentially a playoff team this next year. I'm a huge fan of his. And like you said, I think he has a chance. I think a lot of edge rushers typically one of the easier positions to translate from college to the next level. And I think he's a guy who could potentially step in and compete right away.
Yeah. And I completely agree. I see, like, will he fall to the Vikings? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know where he'll fall, but I do think that he's someone who's getting slept on a little bit. You want to talk some honorable mentions?
Yeah, we could talk some honorable mentions. So tell me why you don't like Gregory Rousseau.
Yeah, that's, I think, what everyone is going to be confused about. He's this 6'7", 265-pound guy who I think weren't his stats like really good? He had like a bunch of sacks, right?
Before he opted out, yeah, he had a bunch of sacks last year.
Yeah. That being said, he did not have very many sacks where he was beating tackles. It was a lot of sort of him, think Jamin Clowney-like, where he's sort of kind of like playing a stand-up linebacker and running through the middle. It's him. Honestly, a good amount of his sacks came from chasing a scrambling quarterback. I think that pumped his numbers up a little bit. Now, he's a smart player. He has speed. He has a really quick first step. On the record, I had him as my number 11 defensive lineman. So I have him as kind of like a day 2 player. But to me, I get very severe Jadeveon Clowney vibes. He strikes me, and by what I'm saying is not that he's going to be Clowney, but that's kind of his ceiling. That's how he plays. I think he's a worse version of that. So I think that the best case scenario for him is he's someone who can just sort of screw a play up and let something else happen. But even that, I just don't know if that's going to happen. His 7'5" cone drill, that's bad. I mean, that's just not good. Yeah. And he doesn't really have the lateral movement. He's not someone who has a lot of great pass rush moves. So I think that he's someone that you're kind of drafting because he's a fast 6'7" guy. And there's value there, but I just don't think that there's first half of the draft value there.
Yeah, so he's definitely the guy, if you look at a lot of consensus, I think, I don't think it's really a surprise because I think he has so much variance of where he's going to go. I've seen people have him in the second round. I've seen people have him the first edge rusher. I would probably take a flyer on him in the second round just because there's so much to him that's enticing, and I get it because it's like you said, 6'7", great size. He has speed to go with it. So a lot of it's enticing, and he's still only 20 years old. So I think a lot of it is enticing to look at. It's just, is he going to be able to put it all together is the question that's going to be on everyone's mind. And I'm not sold 100% he is either way. And I think that's the big risk with him is he going to put it together? I don't know. So I would probably have him as a second round guy I'd take a flyer on, but I'm not in love with him either just because, like you said, he's in and out of some plays. And like you said, if it doesn't go his way, it seems like he kind of quits sometimes. But overall, I think he has a tantalizing skill set.
Yeah, man. Again, it is impressive just the height thing, the 6'7", like that, just being that tall and being, he is quick. Like there's things to be excited about with him, and I wouldn't be mad if like the Bucks drafted him by any means, but I just think that I would be mad if it was like a top 10 pick. If I'm like I don't know, a Giants fan and we get Gregory Rousseau number 11, I'm like what are we doing here? So he's in the same group I have as like the bottom of like the Deo and Dagabo, the Ossai, Away, Joe Tyron. He's in that kind of group of like just the guys you could potentially look towards. But again, his skill set doesn't tend to be the skill set that translates to the NFL.
Yep, that's completely fair. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I think there is a skill set there that's worth looking at. I'm just not sure when I would take him. I'll name off a couple of my guys real quick. There's two guys that I think are pretty underrated, honestly, in this draft. Ronnie Perkins out of Oklahoma, I think, is kind of insane. He's one of those guys that really just jumps out when you watched Oklahoma games. He dealt with a lot of stuff last year, too. I think he's going to be really good. And Peyton Turner, kind of similar to Russo. I think he's a little unpolished, but I think the skill set where you look at a guy who is 6'5", 275 pounds, 84-inch wingspan, and all that, and he's a good pass rusher. I think he's a really interesting player to watch that I just think it's a tantalizing skill set. Like I said, I think he needs to refine a lot of things, but I think that it's just going to be fun to watch him try and figure that out. I'm interested in seeing him. And then one more guy, this Pittsburgh defensive line in college was insane. And Rashad Weaver is just interesting to me. I think he's a guy who's going to he's not a guy I'd probably take in the first 2 rounds, but as a third round pick, I think Rashad Weaver is basically going to be a really good 3-4 defensive end who's going to come in and stop the run. I think that's basically what his role is going to be going forward. He's got to put on some weight, I think, but I think he's just a guy who's really good at reading run plays. And if you want to fill that role, he's your guy.
Yeah. I don't know if he has to put on weight. He's listed at 6'5", 270, but again, I don't know how
I saw one at 255. That's why I said it.
Okay, well, maybe this is the same. I sometimes I just use Google, which is not very. I should be better at going through clicking the website and seeing what that says. But yeah, he's kind of the long arms, but he doesn't really have great footwork. It doesn't really beat tackles in like a traditional sense. But yeah, you're right. He could be that sort of run stopping defensive end type guy. I also have just a few to list off. I'm not sure if you want to get into any of these guys, but like Patrick Jones II, Hamcler Rashad, Chris Rump. You have Quincy Roche and Carlos Basham Jr. Those are all kind of guys that I feel like most of those guys, I guess everyone except for Patrick Jones, are kind of just the speed guys. Carlos Basham is more of a he just kind of gets coverage sacks. He looks well in those, but it's coverage sacks. And Patrick Jones II is more of he's a strong guy, but just not really very athletic and kind of bad east and west movement.
Yeah, Basham's an interesting one. He got a lot better from, I think, 2 years ago to last year. Okay. And I don't know how much of that production was, just how weird everything was last year with COVID and all that. And like you said, I think a lot of it was coverage sacks too, but he did get a lot better in my mind last year compared to 2 years ago where I didn't think he was great. So it'll be interesting to see him, but I think he's a little lower on my I don't think it's a great edge rush class, but I think it's a pretty deep edge rush class, and I think that's kind of what's hurting him. Yeah,
to me, for the edge rush class, there's 2 guys I feel great about. One guy in my top 2. Kwity Paye I feel really good about. 2 guys I would still say really good about with Shelvin and Barmore. And then there's just a lot of like that could be interesting, that could work kind of guys.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting to see. I think a lot of these guys are going to have to, develop something. So it'll be interesting to see how this edge rush class works out.
Yeah. All right. So that's our rankings. What was what pick that surprised you the most that I had?
I think we agreed on a lot of the, I thought what's the guy's name? My gosh, I'm forgetting it now. The Washington guy. Yeah. Levi Onwuzurike. Thank you.
Onwuzurike. I got it.
I thought I was kind of hot takey with that, and then you came in from the top rope, and
Yeah.
So I think it seemed like we agreed a lot on the defensive lineman. It was really the secondary where there's really those three elite guys. You had two of them a little lower. I would still argue. I'm still going to argue Jaycee Horn to death. I love the mindset of that kid. So I think he's going to be awesome to see. I think Jaycee Horn's still going to be good. So that's probably the one I would have overall. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so I got the banner up for you, so that way now you know.
Onwuzurike. All right, I'm with it.
All right, good. Yeah. So, okay, Kyle, our next show will be what was my favorite show of last year, we've all been waiting for, the mock draft.
Yeah. So I can't wait for Kellen Mond to go with our first pick, and I'll go ahead and take the second pick from there.
Yes.
So yeah, next Sunday we'll have our mock draft. We'll be ready to go there. It'll be exciting. I gotta, put my list together. This will be good.
Yeah. So for that, we'll just do this on the air. I think it could be fun. There's a little bit of planning. We're just going to pick who we would pick in that situation. Do we just pick like who we think would help? Because I guess there's a little bit of a difference between so my thing is Kellen Mond is my number 3 quarterback, right? So if I have the 49ers at 3, should I take Kellen Mond there or should I not take him? Because realistically, what I would do would be just take him in the second round.
I guess we'll have to figure that out. I think the thing we should do is I think we should probably stick a little bit to consensus. I'd say we really like this guy, but they'll probably take this guy too. So we can kind of play with it a little bit and be like, yeah, we might take Mond, but we'll also, Mac Jones is also probably who's going to be taken or something like that.
Okay. Maybe like what we would do within reason, what we would do that they reasonably might do.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. We'll have to mess with it, but yeah, it'll be interesting to figure out how we do this going forward.
All right, cool. Well, that'll be next week at 9, so everyone be on the lookout for that. Ranking kickers and punters. That'll be the show after. We're going to wait till after the draft to really get that down.
Yes, after the draft, we'll really rate our kickers and punters.
That'll be our show right after the draft. We don't talk about what happened in the draft, just rating kickers and punters.
Honestly, the only kicker I can think of that I would take, I'll give you this one for free. The Miami kicker. Just take him if you're going to draft a kicker. I don't even remember his name. Borealis or something like that. He looks interesting.
Okay, well, there you go. That's great kicker advice. Kyle, before we go, let them know where they can find us on this after this long episode.
Yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. Follow the account page for the On the Sideline podcast. That's at On the Sideline JK on Twitter. At On the Sideline JK on Twitter. Follow me at by Kyle Gronin. That's BYKYLE. Can't even spell my own name now. GRONDIN. That's BYKYLEGRONDIN on Twitter, or at Jackson Kruger on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe to his page and make sure to like this too. So be nice.
Yes, be nice. And also, we always appreciate when you call us idiots in the comments below. So make sure you do that as well.
Yes, our favorite idiot on social media right now, Jackson Kruger, who couldn't even tell Justin Herbert was good. Never mind that I said that too. So just ignore that.
Yeah. All right. How come I get all the criticism? You had the same thing.
I don't know, man. It's okay. You can take it. That's fine.
Yeah. All right. Thanks to everyone for watching, especially people that stayed with us the whole way. How nice of you spending an hour and 27 minutes. We appreciate it. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.